The visceral reality of the modern youth is not a rebellion, it is a surrender. We are watching the birth of the high-end servant. This is not about the gig economy or flexibility. Those are just names for the systemic drift toward a new peasantry. Gen Z is not entering service out of desperation. They are entering it for the dopaminergic sludge of proximity to power. They have realized that the old path to the alpha position is blocked by crystallization, so they choose to be the specialized hand that feeds the rotting elite. This is a tactical retreat, a metabolic suicide of the ambition to lead, replaced by the ambition to serve perfectly. The body of the young servant is optimized for stillness, for compliance, for the quiet extraction of tips and fivers. It is the end of the hunter and the rise of the luxury pet. The physical body of the youth is tired. It is suffering from ATP exhaustion before the race even begins. They look at the friction of starting a company, of fighting for a market, of the raw violence of real growth, and they recoil. Their basal ganglia are wired for immediate low-risk reward. Service provides this. In the high-end restaurant, the luxury hotel, or the specialized concierge agency, the servant gets to breathe the same air as the 1%. They touch the surgical steel of the high-end kitchen. They walk on the dirty concrete of the back entrance that leads to a world of marble. This proximity is a status trap. The servant begins to believe that because they handle the wealth of others, they are part of it. This is a visual and sensory hallucination. They are not the predator. They are the remora fish attached to the shark. This is the neural rot of a generation. When you spend your prime years learning how to anticipate the needs of another, your own identity undergoes entropy. You are no longer building a structure. You are maintaining someone else's ruins. The high-end servant is a role built on the erasure of the self. Every smile, every polite nod is a piece of the individual being traded for survival. It is a sterile, quiet death. The soft survival traits we discussed before are now reaching their final form. The servant does not take risks. They minimize friction for the master. In return, they get a life of refined poverty. They have the latest iPhone. They drink the right coffee. They know the right brands, but they own nothing. They are a hollowed-out shell, a node in a network of service designed to keep the old world from feeling the pain of its own decay. The financial reality is a glucose guillotine. The high-end service industry offers a trap of decent money that leads nowhere. It provides just enough to stay in the status trap, but never enough to achieve crystallization of one's own capital. The servant is trapped in a loop of high-cost living to maintain the appearance of the world they serve. This is the systemic drift of the neo-peasantry. They are not building assets. They are consuming the crumbs of a dying empire. They have traded their future for the comfort of a gilded cage. They love service because it feels safe. There is no blame if you follow the manual. There is no risk if you stay in your lane. It is the ultimate cowardice disguised as hospitality. The silence in the luxury hall is thick as the steel of a blade, a generation waiting in the cold and quiet shade. They carry the silver. They polish the glass of the king, while their own winter comes with the bitter and sharpest sting. The gloves are on tight to hide the shaking of the hand as they build their ghost lives on the sinking, shifting sand. No drive to the top, no fire left in the heart to burn, only the lesson of service that they are too eager to learn. The high-end servant lives in a state of permanent neural mimicry. Your brain is no longer your own. It has become a mirror for the desires of the elite. This is the core of the neural rot. When you spend every waking hour predicting the needs of a master, your basal ganglia stop seeking personal territory. They start seeking the approval of the predator you serve. This creates a dangerous loop of dopaminergic sludge. The servant touches the finest leathers, breathes the scent of the most expensive perfumes, and handles the heavy keys to machines they can never buy. The brain is tricked. It begins to feel a sense of belonging to a world that would ignore your death. This is the status trap. You are not an owner. You are a ghost in the house of ownership. The modern high-end servant is obsessed with the aesthetic of wealth. Gen Z has replaced the extraction of capital with the consumption of symbols. You see it in the way they dress for their shifts. They buy the same brands as the masters, but they buy them on credit. This is metabolic suicide. You are trading your future energy for a costume that allows you to blend into a room where you are invisible. The elite look at you and see a tool. You look in the mirror and see a peer. This sensory hallucination is maintained by the industry to ensure your compliance. If you believe you are part of the lifestyle, you will work longer hours for lower pay. You are paying a tax in the form of your own identity. The systemic drift of this generation is a move away from the hard reality of assets toward the soft reality of vibes. The high-end servant knows the vintage of the wine, the history of the watch, and the layout of the private jet. But this knowledge is a dead end. It is low-density data that serves no purpose once the shift ends. It is neural rot in its purest form. While the architect is busy with the crystallization of their own structure, the servant is busy memorizing the master's favorite temperature for tea. Every piece of trivial information you store for the master is a piece of your own mind that you have sold for a tip. You are becoming an organic extension of the master's convenience. The physical cost of this mimicry is ATP exhaustion. The servant must maintain a perfect mask. You cannot show fatigue. You cannot show hunger. You cannot show anger. You must be a sterile, high-functioning node in a service network. This constant suppression of the self leads to a total collapse of the internal structure. You become a soft survivor who is terrified of friction. You avoid the hard conversations about your own future because they break the hallucination of the present. You prefer the quiet, gilded cage of the service industry because the real market is too violent for your thinned-out spirit. You have been domesticated by the very luxury you handle. This is the status trap that leads to the final entropy. You spend your best years in the proximity of power, believing that some of it will rub off on you. But power is not a liquid. It is a structure, and you are not part of the structure. You are the lubricant that makes the structure move without a sound. When you are no longer young, when your aesthetic begins to fade, the system will perform a cold extraction. You will be replaced by a younger, fresher version of the same servant. You will be left with a collection of expensive clothes and a brain full of useless secrets. No assets, no territory, only the memory of a life you watched someone else live. The night is cold, a heavy and a bitter rain. A generation traded for a shadow and a chain. They wear the gloves of silk to hide the empty palm, maintaining for the master a fake and steady calm. The steel of the kitchen is the only world they know, watching as the fires of their own ambition go. They polish up the silver while their own lives start to rust, turning every dream into a pile of golden dust. The final act of the high-end servant is the cold transition into the zone of total entropy. You have reached the edge of the glucose guillotine, and the blade is silent. For the youth of Gen Z who chose the path of proximity over the path of power, the bill is now due. The systemic drift that once offered you the illusion of a luxury life is now pulling you into the waste stream. You have served your purpose as a node of convenience for the elite, and now your utility has been exhausted. There is no retirement for the servant. There is only replacement. The masters do not look back at the tools they have used. They only look forward to the next sharper tool. This is the final extraction of your biological value. The ATP exhaustion of a decade spent wearing a mask of polite compliance has left your internal structure in a state of collapse. You no longer possess the basal ganglia drive to build your own territory because you spend that energy maintaining the territory of others. This is the result of a long-term metabolic suicide. You chose the soft survival of the concierge over the hard friction of the market. You traded the possibility of crystallization for the immediate comfort of dopaminergic sludge. Now, as your aesthetic value fades with age, you find that the world you lived in was never your world. You were a guest in a house that was built to ignore you. You are a ghost clutching at the symbols of a wealth you never owned. The neural rot of service is now your permanent reality. You find yourself still thinking in terms of the master's needs, still scanning for the vibe, still trying to minimize the friction in a room that is already empty. This is the final stage of the status trap. Your identity has been so thoroughly erased by the act of service that you no longer know how to exist without a superior to please. You are a specialized limb of a dying structure. While the architects of the world were hardening their own assets and preparing for the inevitable entropy, you were busy polishing the silver on a sinking ship. You have no war chest to protect you from the winter. You have no hard assets to anchor you in the storm. You only have the memories of luxury and the reality of poverty. Financially, the story ends in a desert of your own making. The money that flowed through your hands was never yours. It was just the lubricant for the master's lifestyle. You spent your income on the costume of the class you served, believing the lie that looking like them was the same as being them. This was the ultimate systemic drift. You traded the hard capital of your youth for the soft symbols of a lifestyle you could not afford. Now, the symbols have faded, and the credit is gone. You are a hollowed-out shell, a victim of the dopaminergic sludge that kept you compliant, while the system performed a total extraction of your future. You are a servant who has outlived their utility, and in a world of cold math, that means you have ceased to exist. The rain hits the glass, a steady rhythmic tapping that sounds like the counting of a debt you can never pay. You reach for the gloves you once wore to protect the master's silver, but your hands are empty and cold. The steel of the world is hard, and the heat you used to feel in the proximity of power is gone. You are left in the silence of the entropy you helped create, a shadow in a house of shadows. The systemic drift has reached the sea, and you are going down with the wreckage of a life you never truly lived. This is the final crystallization of the servant.